Okay, so Mars and Venus just so happen to have been just like Earth billions of years ago. Now the question is though, what did they really look like back in those days? I could not tell you. But from what I've been able to gather from other people's creative ideas, and again we'll just call it a theory, what it really looked like, but the idea that life existed back in those days on those planets, it is very possible that they could have existed on those planets. No, they should have existed back in those days, because if you think about it, that was a long time ago. And what happened to Mars, well, what happened to Venus, I should say, sulfuric acid obviously overtook its atmosphere, and the whole thing is dried, so you have no chance finding water there, because it excels right past the evaporation point for water. So it's like boiling water, essentially. There is no water on Venus. I wouldn't doubt it, because it's too hot. Just like there's no water on Mercury. Now, with Mars, Mars is obviously further than the Earth, but what happened to Mars? A lot of volcanic activity. What's really interesting is, here's something that's also really interesting. Rather than sulfuric acid being taking place on Mars, I just found out that Mars has, what's it like, I'm trying to think what that element's called. It's like agon or something like that. I have to look it up again, but I think it is agon. It's like AGON or something like that. It's an element. It's like a metal or something, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while. But anyway, what I know though is that's not part of the problem here. It's all the volcanic activity, and because Mars could have had like all this water on its atmosphere, obviously you think about science. Whatever molten lava, for example, erupts from a volcano, water expands into land. So all this volcanic activity could eventually rose the, because Mars has an atmosphere, so Mars could have accelerated into a point where its temperature was increasing. The water eventually started to evaporate, and it also kept drying up because something to do with the density of the planet, but mostly because of volcanic activity. The lava kept interfering with it, and it dried it up, essentially. And then there was solar winds too, which something to do with photons, lights and high winds, something to do with that, because there's just multiple reasons why over the years the water disappeared. It froze also. So, Mars is like Earth. Certain parts of the Earth, well, the Earth is covered in 2/3 of water. Makes sense. And, at the same time there's deserts. There's cold areas. So, if Mars was like the same thing like Earth, Venus could have been the same thing too. Mars has deserts. Could have had frozen. And they say there's 3% of water on Mars. Somewhere around there. It's frozen though, but it's like it still exists there. But it had a lot of water. Like, majority of the planet was water. But what happened to it was it dried up because of temperatures, volcanoes, and winds. So you can pretty much say that in the past there was a better chance that life could have existed because the temperatures were actually right. People have told me, and from what I gather, Venus probably would have been more of a debatable planet that it didn't have life, because they say something about the pressure during its planetary involvement before the greenhouse effects took place, or rather sulfuric acid. So we'll just call it sulfuric acid. But I'm still confused on it though. Like, I know how it works, but I'm just trying to figure. But the one question I can't seem to find an answer for is, at what point did the sulfuric acid interfere? Because I know what sulfuric acid is. It's hydrogen times 4. I'm trying to think. Then there's sulfate. Well, then there's the compound for sulfate. I'm trying to think exactly how it goes. And think there's 2 oxygens, 1 sulfur. No, I'd have to look it up again. But what I'm trying to say though is before all the sulfuric acid came into the picture, Venus and Mars, essentially, while they were 2 different planets, obviously, they were very, very clean. It was a lot different than what it is now. A barren wasteland, essentially, is what it turned into. And that's pretty crazy when you think about Earth being the way it is to this day, and something like that hasn't happened to this planet.